You think you know Roman Reigns? You think you've seen the tribal chief at his absolute worst? Think again. Because what went down on SmackDown wasn't just a beating, it was a statement. A brutal, unforgiving message that left Dean Ambrose broken in the middle of that ring, and the WWE Universe absolutely losing their minds. And here's what's going to make your blood boil: this wasn't some random attack. This wasn't heat of the moment aggression. This was calculated. This was personal. And after you see what Roman did, you're going to understand why the internet is demanding answers, why fans are calling for suspensions, and why this might be the most savage thing Roman Reigns has ever done in his entire career. Let me paint you a picture of the carnage we witnessed. Dean Ambrose, the lunatic fringe, the guy who's been through hardcore matches, death-defying stunts, and wars that would break ordinary men, was left absolutely devastated. We're talking medical staff rushing the ring. We're talking referees frantically throwing up the X symbol. We're talking about a level of brutality that made even the hardest WWE fans turn away from their screens. And Roman? Roman stood over him like a conqueror surveying his conquest, with absolutely zero remorse in his eyes. But before we get into the gory details of how this brotherhood turned into bloodshed, we need to rewind. Because this story? It's been building for months. And if you haven't been paying attention, you've missed the subtle hints, the sideways glances, the tension that's been simmering beneath the surface ever since the Shield's last reunion fell apart. Remember when these three, Roman, Dean, and Seth, were unstoppable? They ran through the WWE roster like a wrecking crew. They held every major championship. They were brothers. But that's the thing about family in WWE, it always ends in betrayal. We saw it with Seth's initial turn. We saw the cracks forming during their reunions. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared us for what Roman was capable of when he finally snapped. The night started innocently enough. SmackDown was running its usual program. Dean Ambrose had just cut a promo in the ring, talking about his journey, his legacy, and how he's fought through every obstacle WWE has thrown at him. He wasn't even mentioning Roman. He was minding his own business, focused on his upcoming match. And then Roman's music hit. The crowd erupted. Because anytime Roman shows up unannounced, you know something big is about to go down. Dean turned toward the ramp, and for a split second, there was this moment of uncertainty on his face. Like he knew. Deep down, he knew this wasn't going to be a friendly reunion. Roman walked down that ramp with purpose. His jaw was clenched. His eyes were locked on Dean like a predator zeroing in on prey. And when he slid into that ring, the temperature in the arena dropped about 20 degrees. You could feel the tension through the screen. The crowd didn't know whether to cheer or boo because they sensed what was coming, but they couldn't believe it would actually happen. Dean extended his hand. Can you believe that? After everything, after all the history, Dean still tried to make peace. He stood there, hand extended, giving Roman one last chance to remember what they used to be. And Roman? Roman looked at that hand like it was poison. He stared at Dean with this cold, dead expression that sent chills down everyone's spine. And then he slapped Dean's hand away with such disrespect, such contempt, that the entire arena gasped. That's when it started. Roman shoved Dean hard, chest to chest. Dean shoved back, trying to stand his ground. And then Roman unleashed hell. We're talking about a Superman punch that landed so hard, Dean's head snapped back like he'd been hit by a truck. Dean crumpled to the mat, but Roman wasn't done. Not even close. He pulled Dean up by his hair. You could see the rage in Roman's face, the years of resentment, the feeling of being overshadowed, of carrying the company on his back while others got the praise. And he delivered another Superman punch. Then another. The referee tried to intervene, and Roman shoved the ref across the ring like he was nothing. Dean tried to fight back. Credit to the lunatic fringe, he tried to mount some offense. He threw wild punches, attempted a dirty deeds, but Roman was operating on another level. He caught Dean mid-move and delivered the most devastating spear you've ever seen. The impact was so brutal that Dean bounced off the mat. His body went limp. But here's where it gets truly savage. Here's where Roman crossed the line from competitor to something much darker. He didn't walk away. He didn't celebrate. He picked Dean back up and threw him into the corner, and then he just started pounding on him. Closed fists. Forearms. Knees to the gut. Dean wasn't defending himself anymore. He was just taking punishment, barely conscious, held up only by Roman's grip on his gear. The crowd was in shock. You could hear people yelling stop. You could see fans covering their mouths in horror. Little kids were crying. Because this wasn't wrestling anymore, this was an assault. This was Roman Reigns, the man who's supposed to be a role model, absolutely demolishing his former brother without an ounce of humanity. Security finally hit the ring. Multiple officials tried to pull Roman off, but he fought through them. He tossed grown men aside like they were children. His sole focus was continuing to punish Dean Ambrose. It took 8 people to finally separate them, and even then, Roman was trying to break free, screaming at Dean, veins bulging from his neck, spit flying from his mouth as he shouted things the microphones couldn't quite pick up but we know weren't pleasant. When they finally got Roman to the back, the camera stayed on Dean. And folks, this image is going to haunt the WWE Universe for a long time. Dean was lying in the middle of the ring, blood trickling from his mouth, his arm bent at an awkward angle, his eyes glazed over and unfocused. The medical team surrounded him, stabilizing his neck, calling for a stretcher. This wasn't a work. This wasn't storyline exaggeration. You could see the genuine concern on everyone's faces. They stretchered Dean out of the arena. The crowd gave him a standing ovation, chanting his name, showing respect for a warrior who'd just been broken by someone he once called family. And as that stretcher disappeared through the curtain, you had to wonder what happens now. How does WWE respond to this? How does Dean recover from this? Social media exploded immediately. Twitter was trending within minutes. Fans were divided like never before. Some were praising Roman for showing the aggression and edge that's made him the tribal chief. Others were calling for his suspension, saying he went too far, that there's a line between character work and genuine violence, and Roman obliterated that line. Wrestling journalists are reporting that backstage, there was chaos. Vince McMahon, Triple H, and other officials immediately went into emergency meetings. There are rumors, unconfirmed but persistent, that Roman was supposed to attack Dean, but not to this extent. That Roman went off script. That he took creative liberties with his character work and delivered a beating far more intense than what was planned. And here's what makes this even more controversial. This came just days after Roman cut that promo about respect, about legacy, about being the head of the table and carrying WWE on his shoulders. He talked about how everyone else in the locker room was beneath him, how he's the only real star in WWE, how everyone else is just supporting cast in his story. Dean Ambrose apparently took exception to those comments backstage. There were reports of a heated exchange between them in catering, where Dean told Roman he'd forgotten where he came from, that the Shield made him, not the other way around. Roman didn't respond in that moment. He waited. He calculated. And then he delivered this message in the most public, most brutal way possible. That's what makes this so savage. It wasn't a heat-of-the-moment reaction. Roman planned to hurt Dean. He planned to humiliate him, to break him, to send a message to everyone in that locker room: don't question the tribal chief. The fallout from this is going to be massive. There are reports that Dean suffered a legitimate concussion from those Superman punches. His ribs are bruised, possibly fractured. WWE's medical team is running every test imaginable to make sure there's no serious long-term damage. And the thing is, Dean and Roman have history outside of kayfabe. They came up together in developmental. They were roommates. They traveled together. Their families know each other. For Roman to do this to someone who's not just a colleague but a genuine friend, that's what has people questioning everything. Is this the new Roman Reigns? Have we crossed into territory where the tribal chief character isn't just arrogant but actually dangerous? Because what we saw wasn't a heel doing heel things, it was a man possessed, a man who temporarily lost control of the line between performance and reality. WWE's going to have to address this on the next SmackDown. There's no way they can just pretend it didn't happen. Will Roman be fined? Suspended? Or will Triple H and the creative team lean into this, use it to propel Roman into even more heel heat, making him the most despised champion in recent memory? And what about Dean? When he comes back, and he will come back because that's who Dean Ambrose is, what's his response going to be? Is this going to spark a months-long feud that culminates at WrestleMania? Are we looking at a match that will be so personal, so intense, that it'll be remembered as one of the greatest rivalries in WWE history? The WWE Universe is demanding answers. Fans are creating petitions. They're flooding WWE's social media. They're making their voices heard because what they witnessed wasn't entertainment, it was uncomfortable, it was shocking, and it crossed lines that a lot of people didn't think should be crossed. But here's the reality check: nobody wants to hear this. Is exactly what makes Roman Reigns the most valuable performer in WWE right now. Love him or hate him, you're talking about him. You're engaging with his content. You're tuning in next week to see what happens. He's generating the kind of heat and controversy that makes WWE appointment television again. The question is, at what cost? Is Dean Ambrose's health worth the storyline? Are we prioritizing entertainment over the well-being of the performers who put their bodies on the line every single night? These are the conversations happening right now in the wrestling community, and they're important conversations, because WWE walks a fine line between scripted drama and real-life consequences, and nights like this remind us that the men and women in that ring are real people who feel real pain. Roman Reigns went savage. Dean Ambrose is broken. And the WWE Universe will never forget the night Brotherhood died in the most brutal way imaginable. This story is far from over, and whatever comes next is going to be must-see television. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Did Roman go too far? Or is this exactly the kind of edge WWE needs? Let's discuss.